Companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities. Bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis, but great companies are defined by a crisis. The COVID-19 recovery will be K-shaped. Some companies will grow, while others will be left behind. Trade and investment will continue to flow in North America regardless. New players, women, SMEs, multinationals will emerge due to the USMCA, e-commerce, and technology. Only the right mindset will allow us to remain competitive, a mindset built on hope, resiliency, and innovation. As business leaders, we must be focused on creating value for our customers, our teams, and our communities.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Does everybody have their plate of food? It smells delicious. It looks delicious too. Can everybody hear me okay? Testing, 1, 2, testing. Can everybody hear me? Julie, you can't hear me? I need to project. Turn the volume. I know, he's going to come and adjust it. Thank you, sir. Is that better? Hello? Hello? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. Can I have your attention, please? I know we're not used to seeing each other face to face. It's so good to see everybody, and I can tell by the amount of conversation being had that everybody's just as excited as I am to see people in person. Excuse us while we fix some audio issues here. We good? Okay. Well, officially, good morning. My name is Rob Elias. I'm the president and CEO of the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and it feels really good to say that, actually. I neglected to say that last time in June, so I wanted to make a point to say that. I'm so honored to serve this wonderful organization, and I hope you guys are all going to continue to be engaged with us because we have some important and impressive things coming, so please stay tuned. The purpose of this event, of our roundtable events, is really to discuss how COVID has shaped business, before, after, what are we doing to make it stronger, what are we doing to change our practices, and today we're going to be talking, our topic is going to be trade and border infrastructure. So it's a very important topic that not enough people are discussing, so I'm so grateful you guys are here to hear from our incredible panel and incredible keynote speaker. So thank you so much. At this time, I also wanted to thank our sponsor, University of Arizona, especially Julie Ketzel, so please let's give her a round of applause. Julie and the university has been incredible partners with us, and we're so grateful to have their brand, especially the Block A as a fellow alum, to see that on our materials. I also want to welcome a few of our special guests. Of course, it's always important to introduce your boss. So our board chair, Carla Morales, if you please wave. I would also like to thank and welcome our keynote speaker, Jaime Chamberlain. He's the president of Chamberlain Distributing. So thank you so much, Jaime. Rafael Barcelo Durazo, the Mexican consul here in Tucson. Victor Andre Gamas, director of Comce Sonora and founder of CEO of Nexus Global Ventures. And Justin Dutram, assistant vice president in Mexico and Latin American Affairs, the University of Arizona. And we're so lucky to have two incredible co-moderators for this event. We're going to have Oscar Diaz from CBiz, also board treasurer for the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And the chairwoman of our board, Carla Morales. Before we start, I'd like to invite Madam Chair Carla Morales to say a few words.
Muchas gracias, Rob. Muchas gracias a todos que nos están acompañando esta mañana. He'll do the English one, I'll do the Spanish version of it. So muchas gracias. Es un placer para tenerlos ustedes aquí. El panel que tenemos esta mañana es increíble. Estamos muy agradecidos a que nos acompañen y nos informen acerca de lo que está pasando en nuestro, oh my gosh, border. Frontera, oh my gosh. My dad's going to be really mad at me, just so you all know. Me salió lo pocha. En fin, muchas gracias. I'm so happy that you all are here with me today and that you guys are joining us. I'm so excited to have Robbie taking the lead for the Tucson Hispanic Chamber. He has been amazing. He's got amazing plans. And so I'm very happy that you all get to experience that with us at the Chamber. I'd also like to recognize our board members that are here joining us. If you're a board member, can you please wave and say hello? Lindsay Welch, Erika Aguilar, Javier Bustamante, and Oscar. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I also like to thank some of our other distinguished guests, Juan Ciscomani joining us this morning. Thank you so much. As you all know, we have an event coming up with Mr. Juan Ciscomani, so please don't miss out on that. And then also Assistant Chief, Deputy Chief Eric Kazmerzak from the Tucson Police Department. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. All amazing partners. Muchas gracias de nuevo. Que disfruten del evento. Con permiso.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It is time that I introduce our incredible keynote speaker for today. We're honored to have him here and talk about the issues that he's seeing with his business, and we're so lucky to have him here. Please welcome Mr. Jaime Chamberlain.
That's a great picture.
Is there a bad one?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much to the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to be with you all this morning. I see a lot of familiar faces there, and it's good to see you guys in person now instead of on Zoom only. So hopefully this will be a trend now to see each other in person. I am the president and owner of Chamberlain Distributing Incorporated. It's a multi-generational family business dedicated to the importation and the distribution of Mexican fruits and vegetables. We have marketed our products throughout North America, Europe, and Asia for almost 50 years. And our produce industry in Nogales, Arizona has helped feed those countries and those continents for over a century through Nogales, Arizona. I'm also the chairman of the Greater Nogales-Santa Cruz County Port Authority. This is an organization that brings together the city of Nogales, the county of Santa Cruz, the Fresh Produce Association of the Americas, the Nogales Community Development, Nogales Economic Development Foundation, Index of Sonora, Nogales Custom House Brokers Association, and the Santa Cruz County Mining Cluster. I also serve on the executive board of directors of the Arizona-Mexico Commission, so you can see that I'm fully committed to today's subject matter. These topics are of great importance to me as I consider myself a border citizen who is dedicated to the promotion of international trade and infrastructure. I'd like to start by giving you some of the most significant and most recent trade numbers that are affecting our country, our state, and definitely our border region. Trade with Mexico has jumped by over 16% in the period of January through May of 2021 versus the same period in 2020. This is a jump of over $1.1 billion worth of trade within those 5 months. We are easily on track to set a new record for 2021. Additionally, in 2020, we set a new record for truck crossings through Arizona ports of entry, with over 423,000 trucks in that year. The growth rates we are seeing for 2021 are indicating that we will easily break this record soon. As with most growth, we also have significant challenges. Since March of 2020, the US, Mexican, and Canadian governments have all imposed travel restrictions on all non-essential travel through land ports, resulting in dramatic drops in volumes of people and cars crossing through and to and from Mexico and Arizona. Car traffic is down 32%, and total people is down 43%. The restrictions were originally designed to stem the flow and the spread of COVID-19 virus. But over the last 15 months or so, vaccines are far more common, hospitalization rates have dramatically dropped, and businesses and governments have implemented a number of health and hygiene protocols that have helped the issue dramatically. That is why I can say that while the restrictions have served their purpose at the beginning, today these restrictions are having a deep negative impact on our border communities, not only economically, but also psychologically and culturally negative impacts as well. While the rest of the state and the nation are reopening, border communities remain severely affected as northbound travel is restricted. This is impacting our hotels, our restaurants, our stores, and many of our service providers as well. For border communities like Nogales, we estimate that as much as 70% of our sales tax revenue is attributed to our Mexican visitors. But they are the ones that are not permitted to cross the border. American and Arizona tourists are crossing into Mexico for shopping and tourism purposes without hesitation. This is great for Mexico's economy, but we must consider the long-term impact, the long-term economic consequences for the state of Arizona and for the border region if this continues. Mexican visitors and tourists don't just stay in Nogales. They visit Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff, and other communities. Mexican visitors have spent between $8.5 and $9 million a day in Arizona before COVID. And once the travel restrictions are open, once again, we are hopeful that they will be even higher spending numbers for 2021 and 2022. It is imperative that these restrictions be lifted as soon as possible so that our local, state, and federal economies continue to grow again. Unfortunately, CBP just announced today that travel restrictions would continue. I want to talk to you a little bit about why border infrastructure is so important to me, as it should be to all of you. ADOT is about to complete the modernization of SR 189 Mariposa Road in Nogales, Arizona. This is a connector road between the Mariposa Port of Entry and the Interstate 19. It's about 4 miles long, where approximately $134 million of a true public partnership is being spent in our community. This new infrastructure investment is of tremendous value to the state of Arizona, as well as to the whole country, and Canada as well. This is Arizona's most important gateway for the over $30+ billion worth of cross-border trade which flows through our ports of entry in Arizona every year. Roughly $4.5 billion worth of fresh produce, as well as approximately $25+ billion worth of maquiladora products for consumers all over the world cross through our ports of entry. The Mexican federal government has spent $1.8 billion in the modernization of Mexico's Highway 15, which connects Mexico City to the Arizona port of Nogales. For many years, Mariposa Road had been an obstacle in the efficient and safe movement of goods and people that through our community and our state. This project ensures that Arizona remains competitive versus California, New Mexico, and Texas. But don't kid yourselves. The other border states, in particular Texas, are aggressively courting our businesses in this corridor. While in Texas and California, trucks crossing times are measured in 4, 6, and 8-hour increments, the wait times through Nogales are sometimes less than 30 minutes now. The fact is significant because when trucks full of perishable products like produce, seafood, chicken, cattle are all crossing quickly, then we become the more valuable point of entry for those industries. We become more attractive. If we want to remain competitive, we must need to do a better job of telling our story, that the Arizona border is ready and open for business today. Governor Ducey and the Arizona congressional delegation, and the border communities have focused on making our ports of entry the best they can be. Infrastructure is critical, but we don't just focus on the infrastructure itself. We also look at the coordination with Mexico, the inspection process. We deploy new technologies, and we've developed great collaborative partnerships between industry and the enforcement agencies at our ports of entry. Many years ago, we recognized that we simply cannot build infrastructure fast enough, so that we have to be smart and do the best we can with what we have. We look for funding And we have to do all of this while we look for funding to improve our ports of entry. Let me highlight a few of the key programs that have been set apart and what sets Arizona apart from the rest of the country. First is Unified Cargo Processing. It's a program where the United States and Mexican customs conduct joint truck inspections. It sounds simple, but this was an innovative idea that just a few years ago was unheard of. It was developed in Nogales, and now it is available at our 3 ports, our 3 commercial land ports, as well as through rail and air environments as well. We also have the Arizona Border Liaison Unit for truck safety inspections. This is a one-of-a-kind program through which ADOT inspectors train Mexican drivers and Mexican truck owners on U.S. truck safety inspections and regulations. This program has resulted in higher compliance rates for our trucking industry, less fines, and fewer out-of-service orders for trucks, resulting in safer Arizona roads. ADOT has also implemented a touchless border program whereby truckers can secure all of their permits instead of having to park their trucks at the border, walk in and pay in person. And what used to take a process of over 30 minutes can now be done in seconds over a computer. This is not just a gain in efficiency, but it's also a huge gain in the fight against the spread of COVID-19. Since the beginning of the year, ADOT has done over 150,000 touchless transactions at the border. These programs are unique to Arizona, helping make us an ideal place to do business. We are fortunate to work with federal agencies like Customs and Border Protection, Tucson Sector, and the state agencies like Arizona Department of Transportation. These agencies understand that they are part of our success and or of our failures in our businesses and our communities. We need to continue to collaborate with them and incorporate with them our plans, your plans, for a safer and more prosperous border community. Let me wrap up by telling you a few of the key border projects that we're working on right now. First is the modernization of the DeConcini Port of Entry in Nogales, Arizona. This is a downtown port crossing in Nogales, which is in desperate need of significant remodel and redesign. Other than the obvious age issues the facility exhibits, the design of the facility does not allow for the deployment of new technologies needed for a true 21st century border port. In fact, it's a dangerous situation for our CBP personnel for the facilities literally to be at and above the international boundary line. Newer ports are now built hundreds of feet away from the border international boundary line to allow for the new deployment of technology and for staging space. We also have the modernization of the San Luis Port of Entry, San Luis 1 Port of Entry, where they need $146 million to pay for a full build-out of that project. There's already $152 million in the bank to pay for phase 1. The port will be torn down, and the existing port will be rebuilt into a state-of-the-art facility. And then there's Douglas 2-part port solution. The city of Douglas is donating 190 acres of land to the west of Douglas to build a new commercial port of entry. This will allow for all commercial traffic to be taken out of the downtown area and to the new port, while we are going to convert the existing port for cars and pedestrian crossing only. I would like to ask each of you to contact your congressional offices and ask them for their support in the funding of these 3 projects. And I want to challenge each and every one of you to become vocal advocates for what drives our state's economy and what translates into a consistent growth for our nation's economy. Smart investments in land, air, and seaports are our government's greatest returns on investment. But you and all of your experiences, your successes and your challenges are our community's best assets. All of you. Don't forget how valuable you are every single day. Keep on working, keep on developing, and keep telling your story. Our story, the border story. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I can answer some questions for you if you want.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Please, another round of applause. Before we move on, I want to take the opportunity to thank a lot of people that helped put this together, our community partners who contributed to today's event through their sharing of expertise, services, and information. Thank you to the Chamber's corporate partners who helped make all this possible. Our media partners, the crew in the back that helps put this not just on here, but also live streaming for the people watching online. And also the incredible staff at the Hispanic Chamber. Thank you so much. Now this is what I think is one of the coolest parts of the event is we get to have a conversation amongst friends. And this is what I've told the people sitting on the panel today is this is what makes our organization cool is that we can have, it's like we're having a conversation amongst friends just in front of other people. And I think that's really important. So I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel for today. And as soon as I introduce them, if we can give them a round of applause and also ask them to join us on the panel. Rafael Barcelo Durazo, the Mexican consul here in Tucson. Victor Andre Gamas, Director of Comce Sonora and founder of CEO of Nexus Global Ventures. Justin Dutram, Assistant Vice President, Mexico and Latin American Affairs, the University of Arizona. And finally, our co-moderators for this event, Oscar Diaz, from CBiz and Treasurer of the Board of Directors, the Tucson Hispanic Chamber. And co-moderator Carla Morales, Vice President of Arizona Technology Council and Board Chair of the Tucson Hispanic Chamber. Please take it away.
There we go. All right.
Sound check? Okay, now.
That was an outstanding presentation, Jaime. Thank you a lot. We probably don't appreciate Jaime enough for all of the work that he puts in. He is omnipresent when it comes to border and trade. I see him on a regular basis on news shows. I see him on national news shows. I see him talking to a variety of people, and having somebody within our region who promotes trade like Jaime does is a testament to his love for this area, and he recognizes the fact that we need to have trade with Mexico, and by promoting trade with Mexico only makes our region stronger and makes our country stronger. So thank you again, Jaime. This is a great opportunity for us to talk because, as we know, the challenges were immense, and we're coming out of some of those challenges. But despite those challenges, we know now that we can rebound, and now we need to work very closely with our trading partners in Mexico. So I want to start by asking the panel, and we'll start and go down the path. Let's ask what happened within in the last year and a half. What has sustained as far as border and trade infrastructure? What's sustained? What's prospered? What may be stalled and is coming back? We'll start with you, Rafael. Okay.
They asked me to have a spontaneous conversation. That's a very hard thing to do for a diplomat, actually.
We won't hold it against you.
But I will try my best. I'm very happy and enthused to be here with a couple of good friends. I really thank Jaime for a wonderful presentation that I think set the bar very high for us to to give valuable information. I also want to thank Rob and Carla for the invitation to participate. I am very happy. I'm about to be in my first year with this tenure as Consul of Mexico in Tucson. It was a wonderful privilege that I was granted and a huge responsibility too. And it was in the middle of that pandemic. It's like everything was disrupted. Everything was complicated or more complicated. But I think one lesson that we might already have from that time, and border people are expert on that, is like in hard times, we can overcome any obstacle, and we come out stronger than we were before. So I think we already learned that, particularly in the trade relationship between Mexico and the U.S. Not just COVID happened; it was a change of the federal government in the U.S. And the former administration and the current administration caused a lot of speculation in Mexico about how that will disrupt or ease the relationship among Mexico and the U.S. But I think what we already know is like the reality is much more stubborn than any political actor. And that's a good thing, because for both the Mexican and the U.S. government, it's already taken for granted that we are better together, and our relationship is crossed by so many different aspects, and it will always be security, migration, different stances on international affairs, but trade and economic integration we can already take for granted that both countries are actually much stronger when we cooperate with this. And even and I think the numbers, the figures that Jaime already mentioned about the trucks, the increase in the number of trucks, convince us, even if we were already convinced before, that even with the most terrible disruption that our generation perhaps is going to know, it's like the foreign trade among Mexico and the U.S. not just kept stable, but had already opportunities to increase. So that's I think it's important. It's of course for border communities has been a traumatic experience. It remains so. The U.S. government extended the closure up until August 21st for non-essential trips in the land border, and Mexico has been negotiating that opening from March on, because before that Mexico already requested for the land border to remain the way it was. But the government of Mexico now is particularly working in vaccinating the border communities at a much faster rhythm than the rest of the country, so we can have the condition for that reopening. So I think all of those are aspects that make very clear that we had a terrible disruption in the family lives, particularly in the retail commerce in the border communities, but the foreign trade kept thriving. And with the recovery that is going to happen, Mexico was severely hurt. Mexico's economy was severely hurt by COVID. It was a reduction of 8.2 in 2020. But the perspective for the growth are very optimistic, and that growth is actually coming particularly because of foreign trade and export to the U.S. So I think we will keep seeing an increase of this trade, and we will keep recovering from what it's hurting border communities in the U.S. and Mexico.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Tucson Hispanic Chamber. Thank you to the University of Arizona. It's great to be here. Rafael, who's a friend of mine, and Justin, well, it's great to meet you in person now as well. And to Jaime, a fellow Nogales native, is proud leader of our city. And I thank you, Jaime, for all the work that you do for our community. It's also good to see Juan Francisco Mani, who's a friend of ours, and to everybody else. I also want to give a shout out to my grandfather, who is here with me today, and he is in large part He is in large part of the reason that I am here today, not just because of what he has taught me as a person, as a professional, but also because trade runs in our blood. My grandfather was one of the first customs brokers in Nogales, Sonora. He started the Customs Brokers Association in Nogales, Sonora, and is now, I'm a fourth generation trade fellow in my family from both ends, my paternal and maternal ends. And so I'm a son of trade. I wanted to talk about this answer, which is very important. I think we need to put in context the pandemic and the year that we just had. In context how? In the history. Let's go back 4 years, or 3 years. Where were we in 2018? The USMCA was not going to happen. NAFTA was going to be probably canceled, and we were all worried about what was going to be the future of the trade relationship between Canada, the US, and Mexico. In that point, we got a new president in Mexico as well, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He did a very good job with Enrique Peña Nieto to coordinate the strategy of Mexico going forward to negotiate the USMCA. A year later, 2019, we were very close to getting a deal signed. 2 years later, July of 2020, we started the USMCA entry into effect on July 1st of 2020. Now, we have a year as the USMCA has gone into effect, and thanks to that, we now have a coordinated strategy on how we can advance to promote investment and advance trade in our region. What does the USMCA have different than the NAFTA? Very, very much a better agreement that we had. In NAFTA, we had a coordinated strategy of how we were going to change goods and merchandise. Now we have a coordinated strategy in how we're going to have regulatory best practices, how we're going to advance with the digital economy, how we're going to renegotiate our best practices and our negotiations, our deals in the future, how we're going to advance strategies to advance competitiveness in the future, how we're also going to facilitate trade between the three countries by investing in infrastructure. COVID happened during that year, and we also learned that the USMCA is a vehicle to coordinate in health strategy. The USMCA is the best thing that could have happened to us during COVID, because of that, we had the rules clear of how we could advance throughout this pandemic. But also because of that, we had an excuse to keep coordinating. If COVID taught us anything, is that we need to be together in order to advance the strategy and grow. We're not strong if we're all alone and doing our own thing. And as three countries, as a community here also in Sonora, in Arizona, we are noticing that we need to work together in order to advance this strategy for our region and for our countries and for our states. The other thing that I was going to mention is that trade, for example, reduced up to 40% in some areas. Plants were stopped for three months in the start of the pandemic. We had automotive facilities, construction industry, manufacturing facilities, all stopped because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we needed to also advance in a strategy to coordinate on our global value chains. And I think that's the next strategy in the USMCA as well. How are we going to take everything that we learned from COVID and apply it to the future? How can we coordinate what value chains are essential to our industries, what value chains are essential to the future of our well-being, and how can we bring investment to strengthen our value chains here at home? The Biden administration has done a tremendous job in doing just that. A month ago, they released the National Security Plan for the semiconductor industry. Arizona, for example, is a leading state to attract semiconductor investment. Juan won't let me lie in that. We have Intel and TSMC here in Arizona. Sonora has a lithium mining facility that is about to open that's the largest in the world. And that's an essential element to go into semiconductor manufacturing. As well, Arizona is attracting investment in electric vehicles, for example. Well, Sonora has the goods necessary to advance in that manufacturing. And so I think coordination is the next step. Coordination not just in regulations, but coordination as well in strategies to attract investment. And we can talk about that later. But there is a lot of future to be had in what the COVID-19 crisis has taught us and how we can all coordinate to invest in our industries and attract investments from elsewhere.
Great, thank you. Justin?
Yes, thank you, Oscar Carla, for the moderation and the invitation. Rob, also for the invitation. It's great to be here. It's great, of course, to see people in person again as well. So many old friends, some new ones as well. So I think that my two colleagues, Victor and the consul, have made some fantastic points. It's great to be on the panel here with both of you. But thinking about what has been sustained in the past 14 or 15 months is a really good question. And certainly the USMCA plays a very major role in that. But I would say that one sector in particular stands out as not being just sustained, but actually having shown some growth, and that's the produce sector, which Mr. Chamberlain represents in Nogales, which in the year of 2020, and maybe it was because we eat more at home than we do when we go out to restaurants, and we buy more produce to cook at home than the restaurants use. I don't know, but the produce industry actually grew, up 6% over the year 2020. And if we look at statistics, we can go back to 2019 and look what's happening now in 2021. It continues to grow. Commercial truck traffic was really the only traffic at our ports of entry that showed growth, even during the pandemic. So if we think about consumer demand as a driver for these consumer items, whether they're produce or whether they're manufactured items, we know that consumer demand, while we had some variation over the past 15 months, it continues to be strong, and that's what's driving these shortages and these interruptions in value chains around the world. Of course, the one that's getting the most publicity right now are the semiconductor chips, which is interrupting production for the automobile industry. And if you're in the market for a car right now, you know that prices for used and new cars, if you can find a new car or for used cars, is definitely up. So there are repercussions that are hitting us and will continue to hit us for months ahead. So I think about that's what's been sustained. And I think we'll talk about what's been hit going forward, but I think we've got to take the long view as well. So if we look at the past decade, if we go back 2010 to 2020, Arizona's trade with Mexico, Arizona's trade with China and Canada and the world in general has grown substantially. And that's been driven initially by NAFTA and now by the USMCA, good policies, good governance, the attraction of good businesses to our state. And that's going to continue to move forward as we go into the next decade and we move out of kind of the pandemic. If people continue to get vaccinated, we'll move even faster. But the news is good. The trend is in the right direction. Arizona's total trade with the world from 2010 to 2020 was up 64%. That's huge. That's huge. So of course there was a retraction during the period of COVID of about 10, 11%. But if you take off that 10 or 11%, Arizona's trade with the world increased by over 50% in the last decade. That's not going to stop. So we know that our state continues to attract foreign direct investment. Our number one foreign direct investment partner actually is Canada. So we need to work closely with the Canadians. And of course, a lot of that foreign direct investment is in real estate. But there are 500 Canadian companies that have presence here in Arizona, and they employ about 150,000 people throughout the state. So Mexico, rightly so, takes center stage in Arizona's trade relationship, being 35% of total trade. But let's not forget about Canada, and let's think about that partnership. It's the USMCA. So that's the US, Mexico, and Canada. And the three of us need to work together. The word that's being thrown about now is called ally shoring. So it used to be near shoring. Now it's ally shoring because Canada and Mexico are our best allies going forward. So we need to make sure that North America is the strongest and most competitive region going into the next decade versus Asia, versus the European Union and other places that compete with us for resources and job creation and wealth creation as well. So I know that we're going to go on to the other more difficult subjects soon, but I'll close with that.
That was very good. We heard from Jaime, and we're all very well aware of the fact that cross-border trade, commerce, shopping, foot traffic, that's down, and a lot of the border communities are suffering from that, and even communities like Tucson and up into Phoenix. So let's set that aside. We realize that that's probably one of the biggest challenges we've seen from COVID. What would you say is the second biggest challenge that you've seen, and what of those what of those areas of trade may not rebound or are going to take the longest to rebound as we move forward? And what should we do with that? Should we invest in that to help it rebound, or should we say that's just an unsustainable area of the economy, we need to move in other directions? And I'll start with Rafael.
Thank you. Well, yes, I think perhaps it's too soon to try to forecast which sectors are going to suffer. But I think we can say that a lot of the consumer trust has been shaken because of COVID, and it takes people that are visionary to identify how the trends of consume, what the demands are going to change. I think we have, as the governments and civil society and businesses, have a very strong challenge, in my opinion, with what they call the infodemia. It's like how people are actually influenced by misinformation. And I think that can also lead us, or leads people to change their pattern of life. And I think that it's going to be the most serious challenge after COVID. So I think the media and the social leaders are going to play a key role in, I would say, forecasting what is going to happen. But I think the people that actually do that the best are businessmen or businesswomen. It's like they are like the oracles of society, because and in my opinion, it's very important for us, the governments, to rely on that. It's like investing in a sector to try to help or to make it thrive perhaps is less efficient as listening to the economic actors and try to not to influence the market, the trends, but actually it's like in the case of Mexico and the US, trying to support all the social and economic conditions that will allow the economy to adapt to a very strong hit. And I think we can be optimistic. It's been happening faster than a lot of people expected, and it's going to continue to do so. Our populations are hardworking. They are entrepreneurial, and I am sure this is those are the best ingredients for us to adjust and to identify the sectors that are actually going to change forever. People thought that tourism was going to be not recover for a lot of years, and I invite you to go to Cancun or Vallarta or Peñasco, and
Let's
that was
go.
definitely
The Chamber's going to sponsor a Cancun trip.
Yeah, I think in the month of July, I think 90% of our Tucson community was in Rocky Point or San Carlos, one of the two.
Exactly. So let's be realistic, but I think we have a lot of room for optimism about the adjustment of society and the workforce to find better spaces even that we had before, and just reaffirming that we need to keep working on that misinformation that leads the decisions of the public that might be more negative than actually something that is real, like the pandemic, because we can overcome that. We have overcome pandemics as humankind every time, and we were definitely much better prepared this time than we were for the Spanish influenza. I don't think it was influenza. Flu, the Spanish flu. Yes, that would be my remarks on that, Oscar.
Victor, as you work with companies to find investments, what companies that, back to my previous question, what companies are going to have difficulty rebounding, or what industries, and what companies and industries are coming to you and saying, we need your help. We either need your financial help, we need to find investment, we need help that maybe they'd never asked for in the past. And how do you play a part in that?
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for also bringing up, Justin, the term ally shoring. I think that's very, very key. Ally shoring started as an initiative by the U.S.-Mexico Foundation, who we are proud partners of. And they do a marvelous work, and I just wanted to give a shout out. If you haven't seen the U.S.-Mexico Foundation and you're fans of these issues, I would invite you to check them out. And they do a very good job in promoting those issues. To answer your question, I think Rafael pointed out key points that we may be overlooking. Who we are as a people. We are hardworking and we're entrepreneurial. And that can get us through any pandemic or any crisis. Crises are moments of opportunity. And if we know how to harness those opportunities, then we will overcome the crisis. The question of what companies come to us is companies that want to invest in Mexico, not companies that are seeking to get out of Mexico. Industrial parks are growing at an enormous rate right now in Mexico. There's no space to build, and current spaces are occupied to 97, 98%. The construction industry is growing rapidly, and I think the investments that we also got caught up on, like Ford, Nissan, Volkswagen, BRP, which have all announced investments in Mexico since the entry into force of the USMCA, make us overlook the key drivers of our economy, which are SMEs. SMEs, I think, I know, are the ones that seek most help because they do not have the adequate resources to maybe have an exporting operation. They do not have the immediate contacts to get to find a logistics operator. They don't have a contact in an external market that they may be interested to trade in. And that's where we as a business chamber can be of most help to these SMEs. The SMEs that need to change their operations are because they are struggling to digitalize their operations. And so one thing that we're very, very focused on is how can we bring more digital resources to help these companies automate their accounting practices? How can we help them with digital payments? How can we help them with security issues? How can we help them to find personnel? How can we help them find employees that may not be in the same city but are willing to work from home in other parts of the country or other parts of the world even? And we also need to change the culture of the Sonoran companies that going to Europe is not difficult. Getting your product to Europe is not difficult. You just need the right partners. Making an exporting operation just does not have to be to Phoenix. It could be to Madrid. And those are things that we're driving in Sonora. The other thing that we're seeing is that it's easier nowadays to maybe get your product from Tucson to Puebla than it is to get your product from Tucson to New York or to find a customer there. And finally, the one issue that is helping that or facilitating all that is the USMCA. We go back to the fundamentals, which is the e-commerce digital economy chapter, which increases a de minimis, which helps drive best practices within the countries. And it allows companies like Alibaba, Amazon, eBay to help these SMEs upload their products and get their products from Puebla to Tucson in the easiest and most cost-efficient way. And that is something that we are working on actively because Mexico's trade strategy is based on 3 points. Number one, diversification. Number two, innovation. Number three, inclusion. How can we include most people in this economy, in this trade economy, and not just focus on the large companies? How can we make women, young people, SMEs, minorities participate and grow in their trade and show to the world how hardworking and entrepreneurial we are? And that's my answer.
Thank you, Victor. I actually want to, excuse me, Oscar. I actually want to follow up on that because I think that's fantastic. I think that there's three things that you mentioned that I absolutely love. One is the implementation of technology and the diversification. I guess my question is to all three of you. Can you tell me what other things have evolved in this industry? And really what will emerge from this global issue. Talk a little bit more about how technology, see, Rafael mentioned that through struggles and through challenges is when we really come together and find the solutions, right? I think the technology played a big role. Can you all touch on that and how this pandemic has provided us with opportunities?
I guess that would be me. So I'm going to kind of maybe combine the two questions, thinking about what was transformed, and thinking about maybe not retail and services right away, but what's that second sector of the economy that is going to have trouble rebounding, because I think technology is impacting that second sector anyways from my point of view. I would say if you look at Arizona, hospitality and tourism certainly is a huge sector within our economy. And we know that obviously family vacations and fun weekends away, whether it's in Scottsdale or Flagstaff, something that we all enjoy and appreciate. But what really drives hospitality and tourism in Arizona is business travel. And business travel hasn't come back, and business travel might not come back for a while. It might be a couple more years before we see the mobility across international or domestic travel that really keeps places like El Conquistador humming year-round now. And that's not just a seasonal deal like it used to be. It's year-round. So when we start bringing in those big conventions and business meetings like we're used to here in Arizona, I think we'll see that we're coming out of the recovery. So technology has impacted that, right? Because we're working at home, we're working remotely. We found ways to do business using technology that, of course, it's obvious to all of us because we use it every day, but it wasn't obvious to us just 15 months ago. Many of us, of course, participated in video conferences, but it really wasn't the main driver for how we conducted businesses, regardless of which sector you're in. So I think that workforce is going to change as a result of this. And we've got to think about the sectors that are important to our region, whether it's production sharing, whether it's the produce industry with distribution, sales and distribution, whether it's the mining sector. These are all sectors that we have a significant connections and relationships with our partners in Sonora and the rest of Mexico with. So as we think about workforce, and people are looking at new opportunities, we know that small businesses, especially right now, are having a hard time finding employees because employees have moved into other opportunities, and it's a tough time right now for small businesses to find employees. So how do we capitalize on kind of that mobility of talent as they're moving through different stages in their career, and make sure that they're finding the opportunities within the key sectors that drive Arizona's economy, whether it's aerospace, whether it's mining, as we see here in Tucson with a significant cluster of mining innovation and mining technology companies that support the mining in Arizona and in Mexico's #1 mining state, which is Sonora. Are people finding the jobs or the pathways through education, whether it's at their high schools, JTED, the community college, and higher education to support those key industries? And I think we're in the right moment for people to think about those career changes. So technology is a huge part of it, and I hope we come back to technology maybe when we talk a little bit more about infrastructure. But that was a great question. Thanks, Carla.
Absolutely, thank you. Victor or Rafael, if you want to comment?
I would just like to add something. It's like, I think during the pandemic, new actors have joined the economy, actually. More women, more families and small businesses created by the family and perhaps created by necessity, and young people too. I think that particularly in Mexico has implied a little bit of a change in the business culture, because business culture in Mexico normally has been portrayed as something that belongs to an elite, that if you don't belong to, is going to be very hard for you to get there. And I think what these hard times created for a lot of people who lost their jobs or who couldn't get one because of the pandemic is like, if they did a business they had to do a business, and when they started doing a business, they realized at some point they were businessmen and businesswomen now, and I think there's a huge space for institutions like chambers of commerce, for a lot of people that works in the training of all these people, because it's like they know they have the capacity to create new businesses, but they definitely need tools to turn those impromptu businesses into businesses that are going to create more jobs for other people. So I think that also changed, and it's going to have, in my opinion, a positive impact in the way that the society in Mexico thinks about the business culture. It's like you can be a you can be a businessman or a business person, and also the necessity to train for being a successful one.
Thank you, Rafael. If you permit me, I want to follow up on what Rafael mentioned, and I want to give some statistics. Women in trade. Only 4 out of 10 women have businesses. In comparison, 8 out of 10 men have businesses. 1 out of 3 SMEs in the world are owned by women. In Mexico, 3 of 10 companies belong to women. If women have an equal participation in the economy as men, Mexico's GDP would increase by 26%. That represents $12 billion by 2025.
I love you for saying that.
And so now we need to give these tools to women. And I guess we're going to talk about infrastructure soon. And I think that's another issue that needs to innovate itself in technology. We need to bring technology to make our ports and infrastructure more competitive. How can we build our ports and facilitate trade in order to implement paperless trade, in order to implement processes that piggyback on blockchain, artificial intelligence, robotics, and Internet of Things, in order to make our processes more efficient, more transparent, and more competitive. That's the future. We are competing against Texas, yes. We're competing against California, yes. But we're also competing against China, Thailand, Europe, Africa, who all have probably more modern ports of entry than us. And we're the largest and most important country in the world. And I hope we talk about that issue.
No, absolutely. And if you're more than welcome to begin the conversation, talk about the infrastructure. Why is it so important? And then if any of you want to jump in, we really want to make this a conversation with you guys, so don't feel restricted by us, please.
Well, thank you. One thing that we're seeing in Sonora, for example, is how can we build a manufacturing corridor from Guaymas to Nogales? And how can we connect Guaymas with Chihuahua and Guaymas to Sinaloa? We have great ports of entry in Mexico, in Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas, but those are too south in order to attract investment here. In the US, we depend too much on Long Beach. And Long Beach is oversaturated, and it's not efficient, and it's very costly to work there. We have a port that's just south of Hermosillo, close to Arizona. How can we help Guaymas innovate its processes as well as invest in order to attract more trade into that region and into that port specifically? As a result, we'll have more maritime operations, and we'll grow Nogales, and we'll grow Tucson and Phoenix as a result. How can we do that? Well, blockchain, for example, brings ledgers that can give you transparency over the operations of multiple actors. Artificial intelligence makes security processes even more efficient. And you as an operator just have to see a dashboard, and you don't have to have people on the ground. The sensors and cameras will just work for you. Internet of Things, how can you make your containers more efficient and not have have them sitting on the port in order to increase cost? And these innovations that are happening in China and Europe are innovations that we should consult them as well and bring those best practices to our region, and not just look and imagine what we could do, but actually act on things. And it's maybe costly, and the question always is, where's the money? As Jaime just taught me, well, the money is going to have an investment, but there are international funds, the IMF, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, but there are also investments for the future in order to have less costly operations 10, 20 years down the road.
Thank you. Justin, if you want to, I know you wanted to touch on the technology piece of the
Yeah, thank you, Carla. I mean, you hit some fantastic points there, Victor, for sure. How do we take cutting edge technology and apply that to the trade relationship? And you can't really have, you can't release trade completely, because you need to have security. So you have to have secure trade. And how can you use technology to make sure that trade moves with the least amount of friction as possible, yet it's still secure? And technology is the key to that. So whether it's satellite tracking, RFID, there's a number of different technologies that are out there, but we need to look at incentivizing the implementation of these technologies that do work and work in other countries in the world. So there are a number of borders that you cross where you don't touch anything, but they know that you're there and you've gone through, and they've picked that up, and whether you're in a vehicle or in a pedestrian or in an airport. So how do we incentivize the implementation of these technologies for security, for non-intrusive searches, which is an important issue to the produce industry, because you've got perishable items. You open up a trailer and you lose that control over the quality of the product, especially if you have to offload it. Risk assessment, so using AI and other types of technologies to assess whether a truck or an individual carries some degree of risk as they approach the border, and will they need a secondary search or not. I don't think we're there yet. I know that there have been some attempts to implement some of that technology, and the U of A certainly is involved in developing some of that technology as well. But we need to move further. Faster border crossings. So we're lucky that, as Jaime mentioned, that in Nogales we do have good crossing times, but that's not universal across the border. So when I think about the competitiveness of the USMCA region, we need to have faster border crossings, period, especially for pedestrians and passenger vehicles. So how do you assess risk? You need to pick up and know who's coming before they get there. So RFID, encourage everyone to enroll in trusted traveler programs, so that you don't have to wait, and then we'll push the agencies to implement those technologies that allow people to move across the border faster. Traffic control at ports of entry is extremely important. So if, in high season, something we're not seeing right now, but we will see again, that traffic can get backed up significantly, whether it's in Ambos Nogales or whether it's in San Diego or San Isidro and Tijuana. We know that traffic gets back. So how do you manage those traffic flows? How do you know where people are? Well, everyone's carrying a phone. You use Bluetooth technology, and you reroute, and you use smart traffic controls to make sure that people can move and get across the border as fast as possible. So there are people out there working on these solutions. They're working and operational in many settings throughout the United States and other parts of the world. Why can't we bring them to the border and make our borders just as efficient as other parts of the United States and Mexico and Canada can be? So I think that technology is key. And one last point I'd like to make when we think about infrastructure, and it's hit every single one of us without a doubt. I would bet my salary on it for the whole year. Internet access, broadband. So we've all dealt with that. But how do you get broadband to the rural communities? And I know that the Arizona Commerce Authority is looking at that issue with some grants. But I think we need to think about broadband crossing the border, and we need to make sure that we're connected to our partners in Sonora, so that things really can move at the speed of business. So I think that that's a real possibility in the very, very near future. But we need to make sure that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada are as connected and have access to the fastest speeds of broadband that are available on the market today. So we're lagging. We're lagging in the U.S. Go to Korea and see how fast the broadband is there. And that's the speed of business nowadays. So I just wanted to put that, roster that as an issue as well that we need to consider. Thanks.
With regard to infrastructure, we tend to talk about infrastructure, and right now it's a big topic in the United States. And infrastructure tends to lean back towards the financing of that infrastructure by governments. It appears to me that if we're going to move forward as quickly as we'd like to, that it has to be a public-private partnership and also include academia. What is going on behind the scenes to include the private sector and academia with regard to building this infrastructure and building it as quickly as possible to meet the demands and for us to be able to remain competitive globally in this region.
Well, I think I've been misbehaving, and I never get to answer what Oscar actually asks, and, and I always find the theme that I want to cover, and I do it. So I'm going to do it again.
You warned us. You warned us. Fair enough. You warned us.
Sobre aviso no hay engaño, ¿verdad?
Exacto. Now, let me first, about infrastructure, let me share a source of personal frustration because of the career path I took. It's like we don't get to decide anything as diplomats. It's like we are the intermediaries among so many organisms in at least two countries in this sense. And with the border infrastructure projects, I think there might be books written about that. It would be terribly boring, but it's important to find the ways. First, Arizona and Sonora, I shoot out for the Arizona-Mexico Commission because it has been a very important space for advancing things that otherwise would never advance. It's so hard to make all the stars to align in the US and in Mexico, and because particularly the decisions are going to be taken at some point or blocked in Washington, D.C. or in Mexico City, so far from the border. Actors here at the border are normally convinced. Even federal actors that work here, they're totally on our side. But it's so hard. And then we have our meetings of the border consulates, the border Mexican consulates, that looks like dancing for the stars, because everybody's competing to get their border infrastructure approved. And that's just to convince our capital, that's just to convince Foreign Affairs Ministry, who then needs to talk with customs. I think there's a good news from Mexico. A couple of weeks ago, the borders, aduanas, was separated from SAT, or Mexican IRS. In my opinion, that's a good news because they are going to be more autonomous to decide on some of the projects. And SAT, they are experts in collecting, but not particularly in granting money. So that was terrible for the customs projects, but customs know perfectly what they need to do to make speedier the traffic. And I'm totally with Justin when he says there's the most important thing, in my opinion, is of course there are some infrastructure projects, but non-intrusive technologies to make things faster it's definitely much more important. We have been working recently in trying to make the Sonoita-Lookville port of entry more competitive, and I think it's going to take a while, but it's totally worth it because that has an impact in both countries that makes it worth it. So yes, I think the main problem is going to be always coordination, but we know that. So we have to keep insisting until we get the things approved. And when we have, as Jaime mentioned, we were talking about the Mariposa project and how those kind of partnerships are actually put governments to shame, and afterwards federal governments then realize they need to move forward the border projects. So I'll be doing my part and being constantly frustrated, but not desisting.
No, and Rafael has been a good ally for the Tucson community, as we all know, and for the business community. And he has been very receptive. And actually, the reason we met was how we can work together to facilitate trade between Mexico and Tucson specifically, and Sonora. And as a government official and as a diplomat, you do a good job. What are the issues of how we can integrate the private sector to public policy decisions? Last week, I spent 3 days in Monterrey, Nuevo León, to learn about how they operate and what we can take from their best practices to Sonora and to Arizona. What I learned there is that everybody talks. There are no teams and there are no parties. If you want to work, you have to work. what tangibles do they have? They have the Invest Monterrey initiative that just launched 2 months ago. Invest Monterrey is the investment promotions agency of Nuevo León, and that has counselors from academia, private sector, and public sector. I was just talking to Rob about this before the start of this program. What they do is that they have 10 themes, and in those 10 themes, they have 10 working groups. Each of those 10 working groups have 10 members. So you have 100 consultants working for free to attract investment and promote policy that are from the private sector and public sector. Super easy to do. Why don't we have that in Arizona? Why don't we have that in Sonora? Well, we need to talk. The other thing that I learned from there, what else do they have? They have Consejo Nuevo León. Consejo Nuevo León is like the CCE or the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in federal levels in Mexico and the U.S., but just for the state of Nuevo León. And so they have all the major business chambers in Nuevo León in one sitting, and they have a plan that they give to the governor every 5 years of how their state will look like in 2030, 2050, 2060. They're looking 30 years ahead. And I don't know, in Sonora, for example, we're just looking at 3 years ahead and see who's going to get reelected and work with them. And that's not going to be productive, and that's not how we're going to grow. As businessmen and women, we work to advance service for the rest of our lives. I see myself doing the same thing until I retire or die. And unfortunately, when it comes to working with our state and with our politicians, it's just 3, maybe 6 years ahead. And so we need to get the conversation going on how we can start initiatives that advance our projects 30, 40, 50 years down the line. And as businessmen and women, and academia, we're the most indicated to advance those issues. It doesn't have to depend on the business and on the government. Another issue that I was just in a meeting this morning was the Cuarto de Junto. The Cuarto de Junto is an integrated body of 100 private sector representatives, of which I'm a proud member of. And we negotiate trade deals on behalf of the private sector for the Mexican government. And we represent the private sector in those negotiations. This morning we were talking about Singapore's entry as an associate member of the Pacific Alliance, for example. And it's important because we had a conversation with the Ministry of Economy and the Foreign Relations Ministry on what are the benefits of Singapore joining the Pacific Alliance, and we had a dialogue. And those initiatives in the background are happening, but we also need to bring them to the forefront. And I'll end by just one concrete example, which is Skybridge in Arizona. Skybridge brought trade facilitation and trade modernization into life. We now have an interior port in Mesa, Arizona, and a new one opening in Ciudad Obregón in Sonora. How? Because private sector is participating, the government, local, state officials participated, as well as customs officials from both federal levels participated. And that will bring and drive growth and opportunities for our state and for our region.
Very good, thank you.
So how do businesses, government, academia, and civil society come together to address these issues? Well, I think we've got a couple of great examples actually in the room. The Consul has mentioned one, the Arizona-Mexico Commission, which is headed by our good friend Juan Ciscomani, who's with us today. So there are 14 or 15 committees within the Arizona-Mexico Commission, kind of divided up, and you know, whether it's water and the environment, health, ports and infrastructure. So there are topics, and through those committees, everyone has the opportunity to engage with their partners across the border. So that's one that definitely deserves a shout out. The second one that I will mention is chaired by our keynote speaker, by Jaime Chamberlain, the Greater Nogales-Santa Cruz County Port Authority, which convenes monthly meetings which bring together government officials, elected officials from throughout the region, so not just from Nogales and Santa Cruz County, but from throughout the region. And you have, of course, business at the table with academia and with civil society. Everyone participates in the meetings, and the issues are addressed and shared, and I think everyone is rowing the same boat and moving forward in the same direction. And I think that's a fantastic example of how these things are done. And I think we do a good job of that here in Tucson as well. I would say, you know, SALC, you know, addresses some of those issues. But maybe we need to think bigger. Maybe we need to think about making, you know, having at least some kind of binational, regional body that can think about these things with the right actors on a monthly basis. Now we can do it through Zoom, so we don't have to all be in the same room. But maybe that's a challenge I'll leave to those of you
None
who
of
are
us want to do
members
it through
of the,
Zoom.
I think I just
No,
heard
we wanna do it in
Justin
person.
volunteer.
I was going to say to the members, the board members of the chamber here, I would leave
No,
it to you all.
I 100% agree with you, and we'll definitely look into that. We actually are running out of time, but we want to have an opportunity to have our audience ask questions. So right after that, after a QA session, we'll give you all an opportunity to give final thoughts. But do we have any questions from our audience members?
Other than what is an SME?
Questions to be avoided? Anyone?
We have a question back here.
Actually, I got a couple questions. I don't think I need to.
You actually do for the.
Oh, you do for that? So I guess I got a question for Justin and one for Jaime. Justin, you mentioned that during 2010 and 20, our trade with the world increased by 50%, which is incredible. So I'd love to know what were the top 3 or 4 drivers in the terms of industry that contributed to that. And for Jaime, you talked about Texas, how they are aggressively recruiting our companies, our people. And I know that in the past, the growers in Florida have worked to pass some legislation to make it harder for us to cross product through Nogales. So my question for you is what's the outlook for produce, for the produce industry in Nogales? So either one in either order. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jaime. Thanks for the question. It's a great question. So if you think about Arizona, you think about what we produce here. A couple of the biggest companies that have a presence in Arizona are Intel and Avnet. So obviously, electronics, electronic inputs for electronics manufacturing is huge, and it's one of the top items. If you go through the codes that's outbound from either from Sky Harbor or across our land ports of entry here. Mining, so copper ore, copper concentrates, almost everything that's produced in Arizona goes out through on the trains through Mexico, through to the deepwater ports in Mexico and beyond, so off to China in a lot of cases. And then other inputs for production sharing operations in not only in Sonora but throughout Mexico. So as Victor mentioned, things come in through Long Beach, maybe come into Arizona, and they might spend some time in a foreign trade zone in Phoenix and Tucson or even in Nogales. Maybe there's some value added, but then they go on to the production facilities in Sonora and in the rest of Mexico. So those are the things that keep us going. And then I would add to that agricultural products. So Washington apples. Washington is one of the top states that exports through our ports of entry here in Arizona. Those apples are going to Mexico, even though they produce some great apples in Chihuahua and other parts. They like to buy Washington apples. So that's part of it as well. So I would say that those would be the 3 top items. But I would also put a plug in for the Arizona Mexico Indicators website that the Eller College of Management's Business and Economic Research Center produces, with the good support of ADOT and the Arizona Mexico Commission. So if you want the details and if you want to really dig down, you can find them and they're updated daily on their website.
Thank you for your question. I hear that all the time. What do you see the future of the produce industry and what it means to Arizona? And I'll tell you what, I can tell you that the majority of the increase in truck traffic that we saw throughout the Arizona ports of entry is due to an increase in the Mexican agricultural sector that actually supplies a big majority of American fruits and vegetables, not only through the winter season, but also now 365 days a year, every single year of everything. So we used to be a seasonal business and through Nogales, and I can tell you right now, I'm still very, very busy, thank God. So, and we are working daily on increasing that business. The agricultural sector in Mexico is a very sophisticated, technologically based ag sector now. Very impressive investments made by Canadian companies and American companies like ourselves. are pushing and driving that Mexico agricultural sector. I believe that this will increase, and we will actually bring more and more fruits and vegetables from Mexico to the United States, and I actually believe that the U.S. is also looking to export more of their fruits and vegetables to Mexico as well. There are many, many things that the stone fruits like peaches and apricots and cherries that really don't exist in Mexico other than the majority coming from the United States. So that is a very, very encouraging signs as well. We are very fortunate in the United States that we have some of the lowest food costs in the world of any industrialized country. And I think that it is due to our great trade agreements, not only with Mexico, but with Spain and with Holland and with Puerto Rico and Costa Rica and Nicaragua. Those trade agreements that we have and those fruits and vegetables allow us as American consumers to continue to find value in what we bring across. And there is an economic value. I cannot tell you what would happen to your food costs if we were not to have these great trade agreements that we have with countries all over the world, not just Mexico, but Canada as well. So I think that we are poised to increase the importation of fruits and vegetables, and I think that we are poised to increase our exports of fruits and vegetables, of American products into Mexico. I tell people all the time, you drive into Hermosillo or you drive into Guadalajara, and it's like you're driving into Tucson. You know, you got a Domino's here and you got a 15 Starbucks on the same street. You know, whether you're in Seattle or whether you're in Guadalajara. So I mean, that's an incredible trade partner in general terms to have that. Our southernmost trading partner has incorporated every inch of our culture in the United States, our dress, our music, our food, everything. So I think that that's something that we need to always remember and always be respectful of, is to say, this is a great trading partner. Let's increase what we can do. Let's work on creating more business in general terms between the countries and Canada as well. I appreciate that. I understand that. Hope that answers your question.
I got a question.
We have time for one last question. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Actually, it's a point. I'm Dan Valle, the Southeast Regional Director for the affiliate of the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, with responsibility for Cochise County, Graham, Greenlee counties, and Sonora. My point and question is, you talked about a new commercial land port of entry in Douglas, and I didn't hear anything about plans for Douglas, yet I heard that Nogales really has not too much space for warehousing. And I happen to be the CEO of Sonora, Arizona International. A company has been working a project to create a mega container port in the Port of Guaymas, as well as then utilize the Port of Douglas to bring it into the United States. So I'd like to speak with you and anyone else who's interested, and we'll give you a full briefing on that project that'll help both the state of Sonora as well as Arizona, if not the entire United States. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dan.
Thank you.
And it's great to see you as well, as we had coincided via Zoom, and you're a tremendous leader, so I thank you for that. I want to make one point and one proposal. Texas had just concluded its border master plan for 2050 last month, in which we participated and helped bring that together. The last time the border master plan happened for Arizona and Sonora was probably 10 or more years ago. I know because I Googled it, and our friend JB Manson was on the board, and I think maybe even you, Jaime. Let's reinvigorate that process. Let's make our ports more competitive, and let's know about these issues that, as you mentioned, are happening in Douglas, and let's not just focus on Nogales. Of course, I'm biased. I'm from Nogales.
That's why I mentioned it. But there's opportunity for everything.
Exactly.
Especially if there's more volume coming in, we need to know where we're going to push that.
Exactly.
And really enhances Arizona.
Exactly. We have multiple, I forget the number, but ports in Sonora. We have Naco, Agua Prieta, Sonoita, San Luis Rio Colorado, Nogales. We have multiple ports that we need to bring opportunities for, and Arizona as well. And so if we
bring about this proposal of a border master plan for 2050, it's not far-fetched. It just happened in Texas.
Thank you so much, Victor. We have time for your closing remarks, so I'll give each one of you a minute, and then I have one quick announcement about technology and something that Justin mentioned for our next and upcoming roundtable. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Rafael.
Thank you. Well, I just want to end with preaching among convinced, I guess. But Mexico is a great ally of the U.S. Mexico has a stable economy. Tax collection has increased even during the pandemics. Growth is expected to happen in 2021 and 2022. We have a young, dynamic population, very inclined to consume American experts. And we already are family. It's like binational families are a reality for most of Mexicans. There was a joke about everybody in Mexico either has diabetes or a relative in the U.S. And that, but that is true. That is true, and that's very positive. Yes, it's a little with all due respect, of course. But that was the saying. But to remark how families are actually intertwining with the U.S. So there's not going to be any government even wanting to, and no government is going to want that, to separate us. We are already together. And we have a lot of obstacles and challenges in coordination, but we have the will to do it. And I think only in this room, we have so many good friends and allies for continue for that to happen. So I cannot expect anything but a bright future for our mutual collaboration. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Muchas gracias, Rafael. Victor?
Gracias, Rafael, and thank you for the panel. Congratulations to U of A, to Tucson Hispanic Chamber. It's always, I love to see what you guys are doing, and these roundtables are an excellent way of pushing new ideas and bringing people together. I want to just state an obvious fact. The USMCA is signed, but it's the same as a game of basketball. In basketball, the hoops are there, and the lines are built, the rules are there. But you need players, and you need the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks to play a final game. And it hurts us, but it's the truth. And
too soon.
So we have the players. Who are the players? We're here. Now we have to play the game. The ball is on our court. And so let's play the game. Let's play the game together. And hopefully win this time, you know. But and so what game are we playing? We're playing the long run game. At least that's the one I want to play in. How can we get to 2050 with the goals of set on the future? How can we implement everything that Justin so astutely mentioned in technology and innovation into our ports and not just leave them in our classrooms? How can we put education and remodel education in order to make our workforce more competitive? How can we integrate our value chains as a region? For example, if I tell you what state in Mexico has the most aerospace investment? Maybe you'll say Querétaro, maybe you'll say Nuevo León, maybe you'll say Chihuahua. It's actually Sonora. Sonora has the most plants and investment for aerospace manufacturing. The problem is that we're not integrated. Only 6% of the value chain in the aerospace manufacturing industry is consolidated. To give you a comparison, 60% of the automobile industry is consolidated. So let's consolidate our value chains and work together as a region, US and Mexico. How can we also be innovative? Working with our governments and with our universities. Why does business only have to be the one that innovates? Why not government? Let's change the way government works as well and implement new ways on how government functions. How? Smart cities, for example, implementing technology to traffic and to implementing technology to security. My fellow police, he's nodding his head. How can we implement digital payment systems to decrease and avoid corruption? How can we make processes more transparent? And hey, there's a pothole on the road, let me report it, and I'm going to upload it to a digital platform, and the digital platform gives accountability for the state official, the local officials to repair that pothole in less than 24 hours. All of this is possible. All of this is happening outside. Now let's bring it here. And another issue that is very true to Sonora and is important is energy efficiency. Sonora is the best producer for solar energy in all of Mexico, but we don't have enough infrastructure to export that energy. That's another issue that maybe we can talk later. But how can we also invest in that infrastructure in order to bring down energy costs for our companies and our households? In Mexico, less than 1% of people use renewable energies. And so all of this is possible only by coordination and talking and learning from best practices outside. Thank you very much as well for the invitation. I'm honored to be on this panel, Rafael and Justin and Jaime, of course, who I always looked up to. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victor. Justin?
I don't know what I can add. That was a great answer, great closing remarks there, Victor, and of course, Consul, yours as well. So I think I'm going to kind of dilute it down to three things. There is a national dialogue taking place. Obviously, there are bills under consideration for infrastructure. Let's make sure that these infrastructure projects are going to include improvements at our ports of entry, whether it's at San Luis, whether it's at Deconcini and Nogales, or whether it's Douglas 2, the two-port option for Douglas. That's one way that we make sure that trade continues to flow between Mexico and the U.S. and Canada. Other infrastructure projects that we know are very important that we haven't talked about, but let's just mention them. So SR 189 is almost complete. ADOT has done a great job, but there are other infrastructure projects further up in this case, I-19 that are going to need attention very soon. Some of them are at the state level, but some of them will involve the federal interstate system. So we think about I-19 and I-10. We all know that I-10 between Tucson and Phoenix is a lot of fun to drive. So those are things that need to be considered at this point in time and rostered and funded. At least feasibility studies. The Sonoran corridor from I-19 to I-10 to facilitate eastbound freight traffic and kind of circumvent the city. So there are a number of infrastructure projects that need to be included in this legislation. So I hope that all of us are reaching out to our members of our federal delegations to make sure that they're considering those items. I'm sure they are. That's one thing that I think that we can all agree on, that infrastructure brings investment and creates jobs in the long run, in the long view for Arizona and for our region. So the second point I'll make, and this is a little bit contentious, but I'm going to say it. We need to get the border open. Yes. The border needs to get opened. I don't know what we're waiting for at this point. If we look at San Diego and Tijuana. So San Diego's vaccination rates are some of the highest in the nation. 65% of San Diegans are fully vaccinated, 77% at least have one dose. On the other side of the border, Baja California, 60%. So is it COVID? Is that what we're talking about here? Or are we talking about something else? But we need to get the border open. We know that our tourism sector, our hospitality and tourism sector, our retail sectors would benefit immediately from getting that done. Not to mention that families would be reunited and we'd be able to move freely back and forth. So I think that's huge. We need to pressure all levels of government to raise their voices and get the border open. And then the final point I'll have is, we mentioned SMEs. At this point in time, we need to support small businesses, small and medium businesses. That's where job creation takes place in our communities. And think about it when you're going out to eat and your dining dollar, spend it wisely, shop wisely. So those are the 3 points that I would close with. And then the final one is, get vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, get it. And if you are vaccinated, tell your friends, your family, make sure that they get done. That will be the key to quicker and faster economic recovery for all of us, whether we're in Tucson, San Diego, or Sonora. It doesn't matter. It's vaccination. So again, big thanks to the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
Thanks to the both of you for your moderation, and to fellow panelists. It was great conversation. Thanks.
Muchas gracias, Justin. I will hand it off to Rob in a second, but I wanted to make 2 quick announcements. One, I love the fact that the panel talked about the collaboration. One of the things that we're doing at the Tucson Hispanic Chamber is we're partnering with the Arizona Technology Council and the Greater Nogales and Santa Cruz Port Authority, and we're actually bringing our IT, our tech sector industry into the Nogales area to have those conversations with our members across the border. So I'm excited to announce that you'll hear more information about that. And then our upcoming roundtable has been modified just a little bit, and I'll let Rob tell you about that.
First of all, let's give a round of applause to our moderators and our panelists. Thank you. I'm so glad to create a platform that has this discussion, because we all need to have a better understanding of the relationship that we have with Arizonans have with Mexico and how that shapes how we live. So thank you so much for doing that. My brain is full right now, so if you guys need a note to not go back to work, we're happy to provide that. But a few special thank yous before we go. Thank you to El Conquistador for hosting and their staff at Hilton Resort for their incredible job. The University of Arizona for continuing to support the sharing of knowledge. So thank you so much for that, Julie. And thank you guys for coming today. Please look forward to our next roundtable event, August 25th, where the topic will be technology. So thank you so much for coming today. Have a great day.
Muchas gracias por invitado.
I can't wait to have lunch with you guys.
Please, yes.
You and I need to talk so many things that align with everything.
The economies of Mexico and the United States are strong and are competitive, or where integration framework and economic integrations will allow the two countries to thrive together and to recover from all these social and economic effects of this world pandemic. So I am sure this recovery will be comprehensive and will be quite fast because of the hard-working societies that characterize Mexico and the United States.